Coming up today, Korea confirms 5 more cases of the MERS virus, bringing the total to 35. The government launches an emergency task force to try and get a handle on the situation. In light of the unfolding MERS scare, the ruling party discusses plans to build a hospital in Korea solely dedicated to dealing with infectious diseases. Plus, Korea's gross national income, a key indicator of a nation's purchasing power, hits an over 5-year high in the first quarter of this year. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Thursday, the 4th of June. You're tuned into our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thanks for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. We start with the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, or MERS, outbreak here in Korea. Let's go straight over to our Kim Ji-yeon, who has been following this unfolding story for us. She's at the news center. Ji-yeon, what's the latest?
Well, Mark, an 82-year-old male who was suspected of having a tertiary MERS infection died Wednesday night. He was receiving treatment for kidney failure in a hospital in Daejeon City. Health authorities are currently trying to verify if his death was indeed due to the virus. But meanwhile, the health ministry confirmed 5 new MERS patients today, bringing the total up to 35. 2 of the 5 new patients are medical workers that were treating the country's first confirmed patient. Also, a Korean Air Force officer at the Osan Air Base has been isolated after testing positive for MERS in an initial test. The Health Ministry's Center of Disease Control will perform additional tests to make a final MERS confirmation. And if it's positive, it would be the first case of MERS infection in the Korean military. Some 60 soldiers who may have been in contact with a suspected patient are quarantined in their homes to prevent further infection.
And Ji-yeon, we walk around Seoul and we're seeing more and more people wearing masks around the capital and in other parts of the country as well, I'm sure. But we also have several hundred schools voluntarily closing this week, and there are more than 1,600 people currently in quarantine. But with all that, health authorities seem to be certain this virus can be contained. At this point, do we have to worry about widespread tertiary transmission?
Well, Mark, the health ministry just said that they believe the virus can be transmitted through saliva. So if an infection patient coughs within 2 meters of you, it's possible to contract the virus. But officials maintain that an infection isn't necessarily deadly. A lot of it depends on the strength of your immune system. MERS may be more dangerous for those already suffering from respiratory issues or kidney failure, or anyone using steroids, which are known to weaken the immune system. The first patient who died due to the virus was 57 years old and was being treated with steroids due to arthritis. The second MERS death was a 71-year-old patient who was suffering from chronic lung disease. But in contrast, some of the cases suggest that the MERS virus may not be immediately lethal to an average person with a functioning immune system. And for a case in point, a 43-year-old male patient and his 39-year-old wife were picked up the virus when they visited the hospital ward that held the first confirmed patient to take care of their child who was receiving treatment there. But their infections were confirmed earlier this week, but so far they're not suffering from any of the symptoms, including high fever and coughing.
And this MERS outbreak, of course, is leading all the headlines here in Korea, but it's also being reported around the world because it does have a great many implications for other countries, most notably, in fact, China, because China is holding a Korean patient who flew to the country before he was confirmed to be infected with MERS. What's the latest on his condition?
The health authorities in China's southern Guangdong province say his condition is improving, but they're keeping an eye on a small amount of water spotted on the right side of his lung. While local authorities there are monitoring nearly 80 people who have been in contact with a Korean patient, but they say they're currently not showing any signs of the MERS symptoms. And neighboring countries are also vigilant and coming up with preventative measures of their own. The ministry The Unification Ministry said earlier today that North Korea asked Seoul to send a heat detector camera so they can spot early signs of the virus at the joint inter-Korean Kaesong Industrial Complex. Back to you, Mark.
Well, thank you very much, Jion, for the report there. Now, Korea's ruling Saenuri Party says it will assess and strengthen Korea's disease control system and push for a hospital dedicated to dealing with infectious diseases. Party leaders and lawmakers from the Parliamentary Health Committee discussed the unfolding MERS outbreak at a meeting with doctors and hospital officials on Thursday. They promised to allocate special budgets this year to improve the country's ability to handle contagious diseases, pointing out that countries like Hong Kong and Singapore have these kind of special quarantine hospitals. The opposition party will hold its own MERS session with committee members and a panel of experts later on this Thursday afternoon. Of course, containing the MERS outbreak is Korea's main priority right now, but the effect of the virus is starting to spread beyond the health of its people. The local stock market has taken a bit of a bruising over the last couple of days, and there are concerns the MERS virus could start affecting the broader Korean economy as well. Kwon So-ah reports.
After the biggest on-year export drop in almost 6 years, a 2-month fall in industrial production, and continuing weak consumer prices, the Korean economy is not in good health. Now, the possible financial fallout from a growing MERS outbreak has many experts worried. When severe acute respiratory syndrome, or SARS, hit China in 2003, it dragged down the country's first quarter economic growth from 10.3% to 7.9%. In Hong Kong, it plunged from over 4% to almost minus 1% in the same period. Here in Korea, the tourism industry is already hurting, even though there aren't any official travel restrictions in place. And this could just be the beginning.
The spread of the MERS virus is expected to have quite an impact on consumer sentiment. That's why it's time to consider additional measures, such as an expansion of the financial budget or a cut in the key interest rate.
Experts say the finance ministry may include these measures in policy directions for the second half of the year, which they will announce at the end of the month. Vice Finance Minister Chu Hyung-hwan said on Monday it's too early to consider that yet, but the ministry and other institutions are closely monitoring the virus effect on the economy. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Now, latest central bank figures show the country's gross national income, a key indicator of purchasing power, has hit an almost 6-year high, but that doesn't necessarily mean people in Korea are feeling that much more affluent. Our Shin Se-min reports.
Korea's purchasing power is better now than it has been in over 5 years. The Bank of Korea says the nation's per capita gross national income in the first 3 months of this year rose 4.2% on quarter, reaching over $339 billion. That's the fastest growth recorded since the second quarter of 2009, when it spiked 5%. The central bank attributes the increase in national income to better terms of trade thanks to cheaper oil prices, which have pushed down import prices more than export prices. The figures look promising, but the increase in GNI doesn't necessarily translate into ordinary people feeling better off, as the figure also includes the incomes of large corporations and the government. Meanwhile, Korea's GDP deflator, a price index representing comprehensive price differences based on GDP, rose 1.8% in the first quarter. On top of that, the Korean economy grew 0.8% in the January to March period, a pickup from the 0.3% gain in the final quarter of last year. Despite the marked improvement, it means the Korean economy has posted sub 1% growth for 4 straight quarters now. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
A US-based hedge fund management firm has raised objections to Jail Industries' proposed takeover of Samsung C&T. In a press release on Thursday, Elliott Management, which bought a 7% stake in Samsung C&T said the proposed takeover significantly undervalues Samsung C&T and the terms are neither fair nor in the best interests of the company's shareholders. Elliott's statement is the first significant opposition to the takeover, and it could increase pressure on Jail Industries to improve its offer. Now, Jail agreed last month to acquire Samsung C&T, a trading arm of Samsung Group, in an all-stock deal valued at $9.3 billion. Shares in both Samsung C&T and Jail Industries rose sharply upon word of Elliott's disapproval. As of 11:55 a.m. Korea time, stocks in Samsung C&T were trading nearly 13% higher than Wednesday's close. Jail Industries was up 7.4%. Now, an OECD annual report has showed that, in comparison with other member nations, Koreans feel less satisfied with their lives. While they set great importance on social relations, a relatively large number of people here say they don't know who they could rely on in times of need. Our Sun Jung-in has more.
The Better Life Index, published every year by the OECD, rates the 34 member nations, as well as Brazil and Russia, on 11 variables that contribute to a high quality of life, including income, health, and life satisfaction. This year, Korea ranked 27th, down 2 notches from last year. Australia remained at the top, followed by Sweden, Norway, Switzerland, and Denmark. Korea scored badly in 5 indicators, including social connections, subjective well-being, health status, and work-life balance, with all ranking in the lowest 20%. When asked if they had someone they could rely on in a time of need, only 72% of Koreans said yes. That was the lowest figure in the OECD, which had an average score of 88%. In the work-life balance category, Korea ranked 1 from bottom in the OECD at 33rd, with nearly a fifth of adults working 50 hours or more a week on average. When it came to life satisfaction, which measures how people evaluate their life on a scale from 0 to 10, Koreans had a score of 5.8, lower than the OECD average of 6.6. However, despite its low satisfaction ranking, the report showed Korea remained above average in civic engagement, personal security, jobs, and education. The report says these factors play a key role in providing individuals with skills to participate effectively in society and in the economy. 손정인, Arirang News.
North Korea is attempting to accept the risk of failure and operate its unproven submarine-launched ballistic missile fleet within 2 to 3 years. This is according to Michael Ellman, a senior fellow at the UK-based International Institute for Strategic Studies. Writing an article for the North Korea analysis website 38 North on Wednesday, the missile defense expert said that based on the experience of other nations, developing an operational SLBM requires up to a decade of research and testing. But he added that Pyongyang is trying to deploy strategic weapon systems, including ballistic missiles, without completing a flight trial program to validate the capability. The expert said the US and its regional allies must monitor North Korea's missile development closely and come up with contingency plans accordingly. The leaders of South Korea and Senegal sought to bolster cooperation in maritime affairs, infrastructure and energy during their summit talks in Seoul earlier today. President Park Geun-hye told Senegalese President Macky Sall that Korea has selected Senegal as one of the countries it will strengthen development cooperation with next year. Senegal, thanks to its internal stability and continued growth, is leading Africa's development initiatives and increasing its influence on the continent and the international arena. Korea's presidential office says the summit was the outcome of Seoul's efforts to expand its global diplomacy to focus on co-prosperity with the African continent. The United States is urging Korea to take a much larger role in international efforts against China's land reclamation blitz in the South China Sea. Our Hwang Sang-hee reports.
Speaking at a seminar in Washington on Wednesday, U.S. Assistant Secretary of State Daniel Russell slammed China's land reclamation projects in the South China Sea. Pointing out that Korea is not directly involved in the dispute, Russell said Seoul has all the more reason to speak out because it's speaking not in self-interest, but in support of universal principles and the rule of law. He added Korea must assume the role of a major stakeholder in the international order. This marks the first time a senior American official has publicly asked Seoul to play a bigger role on this issue. Russell's remarks also come a matter of days after U.S. Defense Secretary Ashton Carter urged Beijing to immediately halt its island-building activities in the South China Sea, calling for a peaceful resolution to all the disputes. U.S. officials say China's reclamation efforts have quickened, creating artificial islands that have expanded by 1,500 acres since last year. Beijing is also believed to have placed mobile artillery weapon systems on a reclaimed island. Some say President Park Geun-hye's trip to Washington later this month could be an opportunity for U.S. President Barack Obama to bring up the issue once more. If so, the territorial disputes may pose a fresh dilemma for Korea as it finds itself stuck between its two superpower partners again. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
The U.S. government now admits at least 51 labs in 17 U.S. states, plus Korea, Australia and Canada, may have received live anthrax samples from U.S. military stocks. The latest figure is double the number revealed last week. U.S. Deputy Secretary of Defense Robert Work said on Wednesday that the number of infected labs is expected to rise as the Pentagon continues to test the shipments. He vowed that an investigation into the matter will be completed within a month to determine why the anthrax spores weren't inactivated before being shipped. The Pentagon's medical director says all samples tested by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention came back positive for the deadly biological agent, but Work said the risk to the public is extremely low because the concentration of anthrax in the samples was too small to affect an average healthy person. And those are the stories we have for you at this hour. For more of the latest news out of Korea, don't forget to check out our website, arirang.co.kr/news. Until next time, goodbye.